Father Chris, welcome to Carrum.
Thank you.
Father Chris, can you tell us about the main aim of your work and how you see a program moving forward in the future?
Youth on the Street started about 20 years ago now to work with what we call the chronically or hardcore street kids in the inner city of Sydney. There's very few kids in the inner city now, so we've got schools, residential services, but we also move into communities now, so into those suburbs where there's high violence, levels of violence, unemployment, drug addiction, alcohol abuse. So we work with hundreds of people in those communities, Macquarie Fields, Ayres, Rose Meadows, Blacktown, those sort of suburbs, and also in Walgett and Griffith in the country areas.
Are you seeing any country kids in the city?
We don't see a lot of country kids in the inner city now. Sydney, when I first started, would have hundreds of kids in the inner city. We've probably had 100,000 kids through our programs in those 20 years. So we cleared a lot of those kids out, and many of those were country kids because Sydney was the capital for street kids. Everyone would come from all the suburbs and country towns and other cities because Sydney was bright lights and most services. So we've worked with a lot of kids in Sydney who are country kids.
Can you tell us a little about what's a normal week for you? Do you have a normal week? What sort of kilometres would you do on a normal week?
A normal week, I can't say. It can be. I usually do about 6 hours a day. I'm in a car at least 6 hours a day if I go to Sydney. I do directly manage some programs in the tougher areas. I tend to be working in those, and that's really important for me. That I'm not travelling around talking. It's actually doing the work, and that's what I love. I'm not teaching at the moment. I'm really missing that. So when one of our schools gets HSC kids, I'm too old to teach anyone under year 11. I like the older ones. But I love being in those communities. I feel very at home with, in a sense, the ghettos of Sydney where there's poverty and violence and people just don't have anything. I feel very at home with those people.
Do you have a team supporting you and working with you?
Oh, absolutely. We employ about 240 people. That's why our budget's $17 million a year, and it keeps going up each time I go into a new community. And I'm looked after by 3 personal staff who just take care of everything I need, and it just allows me to get in and do the work. So I'm not doing lots of administration. I can get all that done when I'm driving around, and I have, my personal team have been with me for years, and it's a really supportive team. So I'm well looked after.
And what are the sources of your income, and how much are you reliant on donations?
Well, since the new government's come in, our donations are down to 35%. So 35% of 17 million. So we have to raise a lot of money, 65%. So we would have to raise probably 12, 13 million ourselves each year, and that goes up because already this year I've moved into Blacktown and Rose Meadows. Every time you move into a suburb, you put another 400,000 onto your budget. So I've never been in debt, been very close to being bankrupt, but never got there. So we've had incredible support from the people of Australia. I found that they believe in what I do and just keep coming up with the funds. And I go and tackle issues without getting government funding. If you wait for government funding, kids are dying on the streets while you're actually writing proposals and lobbying government. So I get and do the work and then try and get the money afterwards. And we've had some luck with that, but as I said, we're down to 35% at the moment.
You keep a frenetic pace. It seems to be quite unbelievable what you're able to do. How do you rest? How do you recover? How do you refresh yourself?
I study a lot. I'm doing my Masters in Education at the moment, just about to finish. So I read a lot. My animals are really important, and I have my own place for the last 8 years. So no neighbours, electronic gate, animals everywhere. No one can even see where I live from a road. So I'm a loner, so I like, I get my energy from being by myself. So as often as I can, and that's why I'll go home tonight, even though I'll have to drive to Sydney tomorrow, I would rather go home to be home, in my own bed with my animals and so forth.
Is there anything you'd like to say to the people of Central Western New South Wales?
I guess the biggest issue with young people nowadays is a lack of connection, and we as adults keep saying kids won't connect with us. That's just not true. Adults are not connecting with kids, and I think we need to be really good role models because we get really upset when kids do bad things. But if you look at some of our footy stars and you look in local towns, after football matches everyone's getting drunk and violent, and we wonder why our kids do that. So we've got to be good role models to our kids, and we've got to connect with them.
Thanks, Father Chris Riley.
Okay, no worries, thank you. And they were getting reports at my house in Marrickville, which was fully government funded. I was getting extra money so I could do other things through parishes, but the St. Vincent's Paul getting reports like this. They were saying, we believe around the block at Marrickville you have stolen cars parked right around the block. Yes, that's true. every chemist shop had been broken into at Marrickville, and under the beds, kid had cartons of pills. Yeah, I said, that's true. And they said, you even have your girls prostituting over the road. I said, yeah, I do. I said, these kids have done this for years, and I've got to love them to goodness. And so I had these incredible volunteers coming in. These kids, I would have 40 kids in this house some nights. And these incredible volunteers would come in, and the kids didn't have to do a thing. They'd been on the streets, they'd been wild, they were drug addicts, they were all prostituting, boys and girls. And I said to my staff, they were all under 23, and I was 34 or 35 at the time and just had finished a job as principal at Boys Town. And the staff were saying to me, what are we going to do? I said, these kids have been doing this forever. I've targeted this house, the hardest street kids in the country. And on the streets, I love these kids. I've got to know them really well. And I said, when they come to our place, those lifestyles will continue for some time. But if we keep giving them positive experiences, those activities will stop. Well, now there's no kids in the cross, or there's certainly no heroin. 95% of our kids were heroin users in those early days. None of our kids are heroin users now. It's dried off. There's no girls prostituting across the road. I guarantee there's no stolen cars around the block, and I guarantee there's been no break-ins into the Marrickville chemist shops for years and years. And so it was about loving these kids to goodness, and it's about, we're in those days, and Ron probably left, but we then started schools, places down in the country where we said to kids, if you want to stay at Marrickville and do drugs, fine, we'll love you there. But if you want to get out of the country, out of the city, we'll take you down to the country, and there you will do what you're told. You will go to school, you won't use drugs, and you'll have to do chores. And kids started doing that, and that's how the cattle drive started. I then said to my group, can we please get some youth-friendly infrastructure in place? We've got nothing for our kids. There's no resources for our kids. And so they binge drink and do all sorts of stuff. And I guess the other thing I'm really, really strong about, and it was really clear at Griffith, a young Italian guy came up to me and stood next to me, and I had to endure something horrendous in Griffith. I had to watch the dance called crumping, I think it was called. Watching 400 kids crump was, I'm thinking, I'm a priest. I'm standing here. And this young Italian boy comes over, he's a gorgeous looking kid, and he said, you bring a dog up badly, it'll bite. And he stood there, I'm thinking, make conversation so I can turn away from this crumping. And I said, and your point is? He said, well, I've been brought up badly, so I'm bad. And I looked at him and said, I don't think you're bad at all. And I said, what do you mean though? He said, it's the adults in this town who cause all the trouble. We don't have good role models, and therefore we get into trouble as well. And what he was saying was 45-year-olds were the ones brawling in the pubs. And at the Griffith, when those two boys went to court, it was all adults outside the court with nooses. These are 14-year-old kids with nooses demanding these kids be hung. They were all adults, they weren't the kids. So I think we need to really role model to our kids, and I think we need to really connect with young people. I'll finish with a comment from Julie Gish on her first day as education minister. I was in a room with her, and she was, she's a lovely lady, but she's a lawyer, and she said, I'd like to make this comment. Kids are disconnecting with adults at alarming rates. And I said, Minister, I know it's your first day, but I can't let something like that go. Adults are disconnecting from kids at alarming rates. We're running from our kids, and I can tell you my experience with young people, just watching them here. I've seen thousands of dead bodies in Arche. I've heard the most horrendous stories you could ever hear on a daily basis, and I don't cry. I nearly cried when I saw them because, and heard the cheering and the rejoicing, because for me, what you've got here is magic. And just seeing the support and the whistling, and you know, for people who are most of us are well over 40, 50, I'm nearly 60, it's just amazing. And we've got to celebrate our kids. What our young people need most, I believe, every young person needs someone to be irrationally in love with them, who will love them no matter what they do. And every young person needs a cheer squad, that whenever they do anything good, we're there supporting them and celebrating them.